Fellow retro lunatics, I am once more broadcasting from my couch. I went through a lot of trouble to move it into the game room, so be damn sure I'm going to use it at every opportunity. Because I am, after all, game crazy. I got out my old store clerk t-shirt, well, polo shirt, just for the occasion. And it doesn't fit anywhere in any dimension, and it's really stuffy and itchy. So I hope you appreciate my sacrifice, and I'm going to be otherwise as comfy as I possibly can. So, what is today's topic? I mean, I hope you already know if you clicked on the video and, read the title, but just in case, this is about why I no longer review games and other media that I don't like. Now, you may be asking yourself, especially if you're observant and astute and have been with my channel for a while, you may be like, but Jessica, I don't see any reviews on your channel, except for the Sorrow review that I did a while back. Well, dear humble viewer, you are correct. However, I used to do reviews for a blog site that no longer exists. It also had a YouTube channel, and I had my own sub-channel. And I had what I realize now was the prototype for Retro Lunacy on it. I was mainly doing Xbox Live Arcade games. But for the website, I wrote reviews for games, movies, TV shows. And for a while, we were trying to keep up with every new release. This was when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was in Phase 1, the Hobbit movies were coming out. So there were a lot of mega popular movies to keep up with, and TV shows, games, etc. When that website went down and I parted ways with the creator, I started doing pretty much the same reviews on my own website. And that continued on up until a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago now. It's pretty bad that I don't remember exactly. But the last two gaming reviews I did was for Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Mass Effect 3. At the time, I thought I was being constructive. I was like, well, I'm not really going to be very nice to these, but I'm going to try to give credit where it's due to the artists and the people that did good work on the project. It was just, other things kind of ruined it for me. But the danger of rationalization is that in the moment you can think you're doing something for good. And then when you take a step back from your own ego, you realize you were not using your powers for good. So, what am I driving at here? Well, to be honest, if I was a reviewer for like an official publication of some sort, or if I had started this channel with the objective of being, like, to the extent that is possible, a journalist, and trying to give the audience as honest and thorough a look at a given piece of media as possible to help you make an informed decision as to whether or not it's worth your time, money, and effort. Time being the most important currency in that equation. I can pay that. But the thing is, I'm not a professional.
What? Not a professional? You mean you don't research every single thing you want to discuss to the last meticulous detail? You haven't memorized everything about your subject matter? You're not perfect. Why are you on YouTube? Unsubscribed!
And I am all too aware of how limited my time is. And, you know, it's just not worth it if it's not my job to get invested in something I don't like. And I know I'm not gonna like it, and I know I'm not going to say anything about it, or say very little about it, that will put anything positive out in the world. So, I'm going to tell you another title that almost made the cut for this video. Was why I think it's okay to not like an entire franchise or an entire fandom. The former is probably more accurate. I realized that idea tied in with the review thing. What started that notion was when I looked at something like Star Trek. And I was like, okay, you know what? There are bits and pieces I can enjoy in isolation after Deep Space Nine, but by and large, my cutoff for enjoying the franchise is at Deep Space Nine. And after that, I'm pretty much out. And I feel like that should just be okay. If that's where you stop it. Where it's like, you know, I don't like most of the rest of the franchise where it went from there. But that's okay. If someone else enjoys the part of it that I don't like, that's okay, you know? We're not going to agree. You know, if we're friends and we're trying to decide what to watch together in the same room at the same time, you know, the discussion's probably going to get a little bit more, you know, involved. But otherwise, it's like, okay, I don't like it, but you like it. And that's fine. You know, who am I to get on here just because I can and bash something that you like and brings you some joy? Who am I? You know? And then I realized, as I started looking literally at the shelf at other franchises, like, oh crap, wait a minute. This same thing applies to many other franchises, like Sonic the Hedgehog or Tomb Raider. Like, I used to like the Survivor trilogy of Tomb Raider, but now I'm at the point where, like, once we hit Underworld, I'm done. Not interested in the rest. And then, you know, Star Wars, oh my gosh, like Star Wars, like, even if you don't go looking for it, you have probably found some rage-baiting grifter on YouTube talking about how much they can't stand Disney Star Wars, and, you know, I don't like most of what Disney has produced with the franchise myself, but I'm like, I can't be arsed. I don't care. You know, if you enjoy it, I'm not gonna be one of those people, and you're probably gonna know exactly what I'm talking about as soon as I describe the kinds of videos that they make. Hours-long video essays going through all of these mental gymnastics. That's the word.
Really? You stumbled on the word gymnastics? Guess what? You're going to be forced to play decathlete for at least 24 hours straight.
And, you know, using all of this flowery and sophisticated sounding language to make you think that their opinion is somehow objectively more correct than yours. Except it's still subjective. Here's the thing. Even if you're being as fair and unbiased and honest as possible, there's no such thing as a completely objective review. You can be objective as far as factual information. Be like, hey, this game released on this date or this platform. It runs at this frame rate. It runs in this resolution. it can display this many colors on screen. But beyond what you can just find on a wiki page that you don't need to read a review for or watch a video review for, it's all subjective. Don't come at me. Even the well-meaning armchair essayists and philosophers out there, as much as you try to argue it, it's all subjective. There are certain standards that for a majority of a given crowd to them make something qualify as good. But that's not objective. That's just a degree of subjectivity with a high percentage of agreements within a given group. Might be a better, shorter word for that. Who can say? But I decided, especially after I reflected on some of the negative things I had to say about certain franchises, that, like, you know, I don't want to be one of those grifters. I don't want to be a rage baiter. I'm not going to waste the precious little time and energy that I have hating something that someone else loves. How much more constructive is it, and be honest, to extol the virtues, to celebrate that which you love, even at the risk of repeating something someone else has already said, even if that is its own kind of echo chamber, if you want to argue that. Like, how much better is it to just spread joy and to celebrate something, to make somebody smile, trigger a good memory, you know, make someone laugh. And then maybe on the off chance you've got someone who was on the fence about something, and then they see your review of this thing that you love, and that you think is just so fun. And they're like, well, I want to have fun. I want some joy in my life. I'll check this thing out. Isn't that so much better? Doesn't that literally make the world a better place than you being that hateful, rage-filled asshole that just hates Disney Star Wars so much? I can't believe they ruined my childhood and destroyed my favorite franchise. How dare they? Oh, if only I had a puppet for that. But seriously. And you can even be one of those people that's curmudgeonly, you know, a bit cantankerous, a bit cranky. Like, you watched something and it did nothing for you, and it just gave you icky feelings, you know. I'll be honest, you know, I watched The Last Jedi in theaters, and I came away morbidly depressed and hated my life, you know. But, you know, it was a bad experience, but I'm not going to, you know, spread the anguish of that bad experience onto the rest of you. That's a waste. That's destructive, not constructive. But, you know, okay, you know, we're only human, and inevitably we're going to interact with a piece of media that we don't like. And then you might have those icky feelings of like, ooh, I didn't really like that thing. But then you get over it. But then you have these grifters and rage baiters that are literally making money hand over fist and probably having some kind of a power trip too, overtaking that feeling that, you know, is okay to have in isolation, and then you get over it. They foster it, and it festers, and it grows, and all of a sudden you start to see things you hate in other pieces of media, or even things that you used to love and now you hate them because you're projecting the things you didn't like about this one movie onto the rest of the franchise, and you start looking for things to hate, and before you know it, you're in a hateful energy. And then you start watching reviews of people hating something that you know before they even watch it that they're gonna hate it. Now you're trapped in that negative feedback. So I don't want to be involved in any of that. You know, if someone hires me as a journalist, then, you know, I'll have to eat mustard with those words and be like, well, crap, I guess I have to review stuff that I know I'm not gonna like, but I'll do my best to be fair to it. But otherwise, unless we encounter that unlikely scenario, I'm only going to review things that I like. And I'm going to celebrate them and tell you why I think you should check them out. Why I think it's fun and why it adds joy and color and laughter to my life. Now, of course, some of the videos I have planned in that vein probably aren't going to be reviews, so much is just me gushing. But, you know, what can you do? I feel like, honestly, and this isn't me trying to discourage you from trying, like, if you have your heart set on doing game reviews or movie reviews or book reviews or whatever, you know, you do you, boo. But I'm just saying, unlike the olden days, all of our media is preserved in perpetuity. There's so much out there, and especially for stuff that's been around for decades, it's kind of like, what the hell else is there to say? You know? I mean, if you have a personal story tied to something, and you have the perspective of like, oh, I watched this in the 80s, or I played this in the 90s, and then I'm interacting with it now, and I'm such a different person, and I can contrast and compare, that can be interesting. Or, you know, if you are just an overwhelmingly charismatic and hilarious personality, you know, you can make it work, even if you're basically repeating the same information. But if you're just ridiculously entertaining to watch or listen to, then you can still make that work, you know? But, I would say, if you're trying to launch a channel or a career off of that, I would think twice. Only do it if that is going to be, like, creatively, artistically fulfilling for you, and if it's going to bring joy to your life. That's just my take on it. So, that's not exactly every last thing I have to say on the subject of reviews, and especially when it comes to fandoms, I feel like there's a follow-up video that is warranted, especially touching on the fact that these franchises are getting really long in the tooth, and we're running into some interesting problems with these things becoming 50, 60, or more years old. You know, it's things that I don't think people are talking about, and it's something that previous generations didn't have to deal with, because although we do have older franchises that have survived for a long time, like your Sherlock Holmes and your Draculas and all that, those were a little bit more loosey-goosey and open to interpretation, and a little bit more amorphous, whereas what we're dealing with now, it's perfectly preserved, and it's not one of those things that fades as our memory, you know, gets a little foggy, and our recall is not perfect, and we're like, you know, the stories kind of shift and change as they're told across generations, whereas now it's like, oh, well, that episode of Star Trek is exactly the way it is as it was filmed in the 60s. Except the TV that you're watching it on is probably of higher quality. Although I really like this the like freaking coffee tables. The whole thing is like this big piece of wood. It's beautiful. Anyway, I digress.
She digresses. Oh, that's never happened.
You know, that's worth its own video. I don't want to make this super long or some kind of video essay. That's why I will only be reviewing things that I like on the channel. And I want to add positivity to the world, and not negativity. Because there is more than enough of that. Way more. Something we need to fight against. And that's part the Retro Rebellion. So, until next time, my fellow classic media enthusiasts, I will probably see you from the couch again in the next episode. But be good to yourselves. Take care. I'll see you later.
You may be wondering, where has this other semi-Jessica voice been coming from? Well, funny thing about alternate realities and possible future timelines. Just saying, there could be a future possible version of her whose voice was even more ragged and eventually had to be replaced with a YM2612. Basically, she was merged with a Mega Drive and, doing the best she can. That's me. So maybe reaching back to the past to try to help her out and, figure out where the timeline went askew and maybe put things right. And I can give her a hard time when she messes up. Because it's fun. See, I'm not the Jessica that's on screen or interacting with y'all in the comments. I get to be meaner. And it also includes making fun of the chuds. And the trolls. And all the kinds of things that they like to say. Because they think they can get away with anything on the internet. And I'm just saying, it's not impossible that I could also be a representation of her self-critic, the part of her that is intensely overcritical and self-loathing and self-hating. The little voice that looks in the mirror and says that you're ugly. Maybe we can bring that out in the open and make fun of it. And maybe all the versions of us working together can defeat these anxieties and insecurities and these critics that have gone way too far. Who can say?